Hey everybody, and Tony here with a review of Verdi's Aida, which was shown last night at the Erkel Theater. The conductor was Kalman Sinai, the production was done by Janos Mahatsi, the set design was handled by Solt Kale, the costumes were done by Krista Remetta, the choreographer was Johanna Bodor, and the chorus master was Kalman Strauss. Now this also marks the third production that I have seen of what I have to consider to be one of Verdi's finest masterpieces of all time. And I also have to say that I really love the production and the costumes. They have that sort of traditional meets modern feel. Traditional because it still maintains the spirit of how Verdi's Aida is set, like with all of the fine scenography containing hieroglyphics, statues, and all of those wonderful stuff, especially the torches being used in the judgment scene, and especially with the whole modern concept with all of the action being taking place in the first act, with a lot of the photographers taking pictures of what's been happening with all the slaves, with everything that's happening. And I really have to say that the costumes looked really, really elegant, as to be expected in any production of Aida. The ones that stood out for me were Amneris's and Aida's costumes, which were worn respectively by Erika Gall and Aniko Bodogni. I have to say that these two looked like goddesses. They looked absolutely gorgeous, and they fit their forms very, very well. What's also interesting about this production was that every time the curtain opens, we see that there are some dancers who basically introduced the scene. And I thought that was really, really, really gorgeous, because you usually expect the dancing to happen in the triumphal scene and even in Amneris's parlor scene before she has her duet with Aida, which I found very fascinating. So overall, I'm not going to mince words here. I really, really love the production. And now we get to the singers, and even though this opera is called Aida, and even though Aida is the main character, it seems that it should be called Amneris, because Amneris seems to basically dominate the stage and very much steals the show throughout the entire evening. And if I were to be a great Wagnerian soprano or a dramatic mezzo, then I would really, really love to sing a lot of Amneris's music. I would love to sing her music in the first act with her trio with Radames and Aida, her duet with Aida, and her involvement in the triumphal scene. That moment where she screams Traditor to Radames after she discovers his betrayal with Aida and Amonasro. And of course, the inimitable judgment scene, in which it starts off with her little duet with Radames, and then the judgment scene itself, where she ends the scene with Empiarazza anatema su voi, la vendetta da c'è descenderà anatema su voi. That would be something that would have been really, really worthwhile if I were to be a Wagnerian soprano or a dramatic mezzo. And last night's Amneris was, as I said before in my Valkyria review, was Erika Gall, who, like I said before, sang Grimgerda a few nights ago, and then finds herself singing Amneris. Not an easy task to do. Then again, how much more if any Wagnerian soprano would have sang the likes of Brunhilde, Isolde, Venus, Ortrud, Electra, the Wozzeck Marie, or even Ariane from Ariane et Barbe Bleue, or Didon from Le Toyon, one night, and then a few nights from now sing Amneris, or even have a dramatic mezzo singing the likes of Fricka, Brangena, Magdalena from Meistersinger von Nuremberg, Federica from Luisa Milla, Azucena from Trovatore, Herodias from Salome, Dalila, in one night, and even a few nights from now sing Amneris. Probably would be a lot more challenging than anyone would think. Anyways, with Erika Gall as Amneris, what did I think of her? I absolutely loved her. Vocally, she has such a strength, beauty, grace, and an overall agility that makes her singing come out so wonderfully. She hits all of the high notes very well, and even the low notes she sings with such a fine timbre, and I love all of her middle notes. Now, I did notice that in the judgment scene, she did come a little bit harsh in her chest notes, but I also realized that the judgment scene is one of the toughest scenes for any Wagnerian soprano or dramatic mezzo or any Zwischenfach soprano to sing, mostly because, as according to an interview with Gena Dimitrova regarding Neris, she said that vocally for her it's not too demanding, but the demands basically come from her personality and even how beautifully it's written and how well written it really is. Because in this scene, Amneris is in a totally desperate situation. Radames is about to be chained and is about to be killed because of his crimes. And she can't bear it anymore because she is totally crazy over the guy. And at the same time, she can't even manage the fact that Amneris can't even rip off or tear this grand love that Radames has for Aida. Now, that's something that makes Amneris very much a challenging character to portray, let alone sing. And I thought that Erika Gall managed to really sing her role very, very well. I bought her as this princess who will be queen one day. I bought her as this woman who is in love with Radames, yet is also very much jealous of Aida. I bought her from beginning to end. She was very much in her full fury in the judgment scene, and there are moments in which she can sing rather tenderly, and she has a voice in which she really, really likes to manipulate. When she sings tenderly, she sings softly and keeps everything in her head. When she has to really be in her full wrath and fury, she lets it all out. And her acting was totally well done. Like I said, she has the looks and the manner and just the overall grace of an Egyptian princess. And as I said before, that dress that she wore looked absolutely divine on her. She just looked like a goddess. So I'm not going to mince words here. Erika Gall as Amneris. Brava to you, Madame Gall. You have done very well in this role, and I really feel that you have a great future. I could definitely see Madame Gall singing the roles of Fricka, Brangena, Azucena, Santuzza, any roles that are designed perfectly for her voice. She is, without a doubt, one of the hottest dramatic mezzos to really enter the opera stage, and I'm just glad that I saw her live. She was such a joy to listen to from beginning to end. And then we get to the main heroine, Aida, sung tonight or last night by Aniko Bakonyi, a name that I have never heard of before. And thank goodness that I managed to see her live because how she sang Aida was just so well done. First of all, she has a very creamy and rich spinto soprano sound in which she loves to manipulate. When she sings softly, she keeps everything in her head and sings them all lightly and with a fine pianissimo as to be expected from any singer of Aida. And when she has to sing all the high notes, she just lets them rip. She is a very versatile singer and she really inhabited her role with such beauty, agility, and with such a strength that I was totally captivated with her performance. And she gives off a very fine and captivating performance all throughout the evening. She was a very fine singer, and she was a very, very fine interpreter of this role. And I can't wait to see a lot more of her in the future. And then we have the small small female role of the High Priestess, sung by Silvia Verus, who I also saw a few days ago singing Valtraute in Die Walküre. Usually, I would like to have a lighter lyric soprano voice singing this role. You know, any type of voice that has sung The Shepherd from Tannhäuser, or even the likes of Marceline from Fidelio. What I heard last night was a very fine lyric mezzo voice, which I definitely have to say she really does know how to put that lovely instrument into such a fine cascade of sound, and she really knows how to use it in her advantage. Not to mention, the priestess in this opera is basically seen on stage as I always like to see the priestess on stage a lot more. And interestingly enough, the original manuscript calls her Termutis. And in this scene, Sylvia Voros, as the high priestess, has to do a human sacrifice with this dancer, and I definitely enjoy that. I definitely enjoyed that little scene with her where she has to make like a human sacrifice as the high priestess. And let me just tell you that even though her role was extremely small, I really have to say that Sylvia Varus as the high priestess, she was just fabulous. She really manipulated her lovely light lyric mezzo voice really well into this thankless role, and she had a very fine stage presence. And now we get to the men, starting off with our main hero, Radames, sung by Attila Fekete, a name that I've heard a lot of before. I've kind of seen his name a lot when I was researching on Wikipedia and all of those other sites, yet I've never heard his voice live before. And now that I've heard his voice live, I have to say, wow. He has a very fine spinto tenor voice, and he has what a lot of opera experts would call the squillo, which means that he has that homogeneity between the low notes, the middle notes, and the high notes. But more than anything, it's his high notes that really sell it for me. They have that bing to it. They have that certain ring, and they have that certain pizzazz in which he loves to manipulate a lot. He definitely was vocally great throughout the evening. He sang Celeste Aida with such aplomb that after he sings that B flat in fortissimo, he then transitions into a lovely pianissimo in morendo, which I definitely enjoyed. His character portrayal of Radames, he was absolutely fine. I kind of bought him as this Egyptian captain who will one day lead his people to victory, and he has a very fine stage presence all throughout. But if I were to compare him to, like, let's say, Erkel, I have to say that Erkel takes the upper hand in terms of overall stage presence. With Monsieur Fekete, I really enjoyed him, watching him as Radames. Vocally, he was very exciting as he has a very fine and wonderful spinto tenor voice. However, there was something kind of missing with his voice. I do expect a more baritonal sound for Radames, usually the likes of Lauritz Melchior or Ramon Vinay, John Vickers, or Placido Domingo, to name a few, or Carl Tanner. I usually like to have a more baritonal quality in his voice, but as he is, I thought he was able to give a very fine portrayal overall in terms of his voice and in terms of his acting. Then we have the High Priest Ramphis, sung by Istvan Rach. He has a very fine voice. It has a very Slavic texture, as in the way he pronounces his vowels and in the way he pronounces certain words, and also that timbre, which is very typical of a lot of Slavic bassos. He has a very fine basso profondo voice in which he loves to manipulate, and he has a very commanding and very exciting stage presence, which is also helped by his glowering gazes and his overall manner on stage, which I felt was very exciting. Singing the role of the King of Egypt was Christian Chiar. Though he has a very fine basso profondo voice, I have to say one thing about his pronunciation. He needs to work on his Italian, because there are some words that sound really, really weird to me. And there are some moments in which his Italian wasn't really that great. It was rather mediocre. But overall, I have to say that his voice was very much superb, though he really needs to work on his Italian pronunciation because there were some moments in which he pronounces words rather weirdly, and it didn't really sound right to my ears. But still, his voice was very fine all throughout, as he really loved to use that basso profondo voice to his advantage. And then in the extremely small male role of the messenger, we have Gergely Uivari, who has a very fine voice and a very fine stage presence all throughout. And then we have Amonazro, sung by Anatoly Fokanov, another singer I have never heard of before, but thank goodness that I've seen him live on stage. He has a very fine voice all throughout. He has a very fine stage presence, and what I've noticed about his movements on stage is that there are times in which he kind of goes all out with them. Like he moves his arms all around, he moves his fists all around on stage to really help get his voice out. He did have a very lukewarm start, but he got a lot better throughout the opera. It's not a voice that I'm not particularly fond of, because usually when I expect a voice to come out of any Amonazro, I would usually think the likes of Giuseppe Taddei, Tito Gobbi, or even the ever inimitable Gian Giacomo Guelfi. Now, he's very much the one who set the standards for a great Amonazro. With Anatoly Fokanov, I thought he has a very fine voice and he has a very fine stage presence all throughout. But it's not a voice I'd like to go crazy over. But still, he has a very fine voice, he has a very fine stage presence, and his overall mannerisms on stage really do encapsulate the overall anxiety and the overall anguish that this king goes through. So overall, I really have to say that the singing was excellent all throughout. Special kudos goes to Erkel singing the role of Amneris, as she really shone the brightest among this wonderful cast of stars. Not to mention, her judgment scene was excellently done, as she really captures the anguish and the overall fury of Amneris, feeling that she is going to lose the love of her life, Radames. And I thought she portrayed that very well. The conducting done by Maestro Kauman Sine was really solid all throughout, though I would have loved to have a little bit more oomph and push with the conducting, because there were moments in which it sounded kind of light to my ears and it just sounded almost too pleasant. But regardless, I thought that his conducting was solid all throughout, even though it needs a little bit more oomph and push. So overall, last night was a very fine evening for opera, with very fine singers, specifically the singing done by Erika Gall, Aniko Boconi, and Attila Fekete, with fine conducting and a wonderful production. I really have to say that this Aida was something that was very much worthwhile for me. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in later this evening where I review Bach's Johannes Passion. So until then, see you later, everybody.